I'm like very health oriented person. I do care about keeping my fertility count intact. An ice pack to protect my sperm, my testicles basically.
What we've seen is a huge uptick in interest for young men in their sperm count, in their future fertility, and what that might look like.
Male infertility is real, it's getting more common, but if you actually look on the internet and actually seek advice, most of it is wrong.
Men should have to spend 9 months getting into the best physical shape of their life before having a baby. That's a quote from a TikTok video that's been liked 2.5 million times, and it's part of a wider conversation people are having online about a trend called fertility maxing. This isn't about the gals this time though. It sees young men trying a whole bunch of hacks to try and improve their sperm health. Simon spends nearly an hour every day on his fertility routine.
A lot of diseases have like low sperm count correlations, so it's something that I'm generally scared of. Started using like 100% cotton-made clothes without any microplastics that could disrupt like their endocrine function and your fertility as well.
The content is often pushed by male wellness influencers, but is it really about raising more awareness of male fertility, or is it about other anxieties Gen Z men might have about their health and masculinity in more general terms? I'm Ikra, this is What's in the World from the BBC World Service. Okay, so let's get into it. Jackie Wakefield is our global health correspondent, and she's right here right now. Hey, Jackie.
Hey, how are you?
Not bad. Okay, Jackie, when I heard fertility maxing, I heard that term, I kind of associated it with female fertility, as a lot of people might when they hear that term. But this is about male fertility, right?
Yeah, exactly. So fertility maxing can be male or female. Sometimes it's also called sperm maxing when it's for men. But yeah, in essence, what we've seen is a huge uptick in interest for young men in their sperm count, in their future fertility, and what that might look like.
And you've been speaking to men who've been getting involved in this trend. What have they been saying?
Yeah, so we've spoken to a bunch of men all around the world who are at kind of different life stages. So what really stuck out to me was a lot of young men are getting interested in their fertility before they're even thinking of having kids. So a lot of them kind of expressed this anxiety around sperm counts, the wish to have kids one day, but also what sperm counts meant for other health markers, whether it had an impact on their testosterone, whether it affects their masculinity at all. So a lot of young men are starting to try more and more, I guess, odd or unproven methods to maximize their fertility.
What sort of things are they doing?
So we've spoken to a whole bunch of men who are trying a range of methods. Some of them are pretty harmless and some of them are a bit stranger and may have negative health effects. So one guy, Simon in Miami, he's worried about microplastics. So he goes into the sauna where he says that it sweats out the microplastics. There's no proof to show that this would have an impact on sperm count or testosterone health. And then he also wears an ice pack to protect his testes from the heat. So we've got a clip of that.
Big influence of mine was Brian Johnson. He started like talking about the importance of fertility in men. I'm like very health oriented person. I do care about keeping my fertility count intact. An ice pack to protect my sperm, my testicles basically. I do plan to have my fertility tested this year. I think hormones is a very important part of our well-being, and that's a great fear of mine.
So that's what Simon's had to say, but what other things are people trying? What are the other hacks?
So two more unproven methods that some men are trying is one is sticking with the microplastics theme. So men are actually donating their blood in the hopes that it will clean that blood of microplastics, in the hopes that it will then not reach the sperm. The second unproven method that some men are doing is taking massive supplement stacks in the hopes that something will improve the sperm quality. And then the third thing that is unproven and potentially dangerous is a lot of young men are taking peptides and other hormonal treatments in the hopes that that will also increase sperm count.
So we've heard about some of the different hacks that men are trying. What is inspiring them, though, to try these things?
So, what's really behind it is influences. What's happened is there's been a rise in pronatalism. So, what that is being supportive of people having more and more kids. And because of dropping birth rates in more than half of countries around the world, it's become quite a favourite topic of manosphere adjacent influencers, biohackers, lots of politicians, and also, billionaires, Silicon Valley kind of entrepreneurs. And what that means is it's becoming really viral. So we've seen Joe Rogan talk about it, and other really large influencers in the space. What we've also seen is influencers like Brian Johnson, who's kind of famous for wanting to be one of the first guys to not die. So he's famous for a bunch of longevity hacks and trying to improve his health. He was one of the biggest boosters, I guess, of the ice pack on the testicles hack in the sauna to improve sperm count.
And it's interesting that Simon, who we heard from earlier, isn't in a relationship. He wants kids, but he's still thinking about his fertility without being in a relationship at the moment.
That's what was really stark. So a lot of the young guys that we spoke to around the world were not at the stage where they're actually ready to have a baby, but it was still something that they were really concerned about. The other factor was Simon actually hasn't had his sperm count tested. So he's doing all of these kind of packs to improve his sperm count when he doesn't actually know if there's a problem in the first place. That's something that we saw again and again, is people just having this anxiety, having this fear, even though they themselves haven't gotten tested yet.
Yeah. And it kind of leads me to think, what is the science behind all of this then? Do any of these hacks actually work?
What's really tricky about male fertility is it has actually been an under-researched space. There's not a lot of information about it. Even with sperm counts dropping, there's been some pretty inconclusive data around it. We know sperm counts are falling, but we don't really know what impact that is actually having on fertility. And then you've got the added aspect of there's some really scary stats out there which are making men really worried about it. So what that's kind of allowed to happen was a space of influencers to sort of make money off a bunch of hacks, supplements, coaching, where they can help men with their fertility, because there isn't really the space for that in mainstream medicine. A lot of these hacks may not be harmful for your health or may have a little bit of evidence behind them, such as animal studies. So, for example, protecting your sperm from heat, that does have evidence that would protect your sperm count, whereas wearing an ice pack on your testicles, that doesn't have evidence behind it. But we spoke to Professor Channa Jayasena, who's a fertility expert at Imperial College, to find out more.
Male infertility is real, it's getting more common, but if you actually look on the internet and actually seek advice, most of it is wrong. I don't think anyone should be wearing an ice pack near their testicles. This is a classic example of what happens on the internet, where there is a nugget of truth and science, where we know the testes can be temporarily lower their operating efficiency making sperm with heat, and then someone thinks, right, let's solve that with an ice pack. It's completely unfounded. That's an example of potentially dangerous advice that someone could take to extremes and actually cause harm for themselves.
And as we were just talking about there, men's fertility isn't something we always chat about. It's been a bit overlooked in the past. And so when it comes to the stats, 30% of fertility issues when couples are trying to have a baby come down to the man, 30% down to the woman, and 40% goes to both or unknown causes. And so it's left me wondering, with the conversation that's happening online around male fertility at the moment, is that raising more awareness? Could it be a good thing as well? What sort of conversations are we seeing around that?
Look, awareness is great. And I think a lot of the experts that we spoke to all talked about this awareness is positive. And it's really important to have men also taking responsibility in fertility conversations as well. However, what becomes a problem is when it kind of goes into anxiety or fear, and when influencers selling unproven methods then kind of fill that gap. That's when it becomes a problem. We don't want men, becoming so anxious about their fertility before they've even been tested or before there's really a need to. There's also a really important thing to have here, where men should go see a doctor, because there are some methods that they can do that are proven, and under guidance of a doctor, they can then really improve their chances. And then the last thing is, if you do have such bad anxiety about your fertility that you are then seeking out alternative methods, that's when you could waste your money and you could potentially damage your health.
And I guess the other side to this as well, why it's important in the way it's being phrased to some men online, is the link to masculinity, right, as well.
Exactly. So I think we've always seen in these like manosphere spaces a really big insecurity around testosterone. And the natural next step of insecurity about testosterone is insecurity about sperm count. So what we've seen is, in Silicon Valley, there's been this like sperm Olympics where they're like racing their sperm. There's a whole bunch of things cropping up that men now can feel bad about with their sperm. Like, is it the fastest one? Is it the healthiest? Is my sperm count the highest? There's so many things that men now have to feel insecure about, just like they did with testosterone when that was something that influencers were speaking about. Because testosterone production, if you are doing this naturally and if you do have high testosterone production, that does impact sperm quality. It's just a new thing for men to be insecure about.
Definitely. Jackie, thank you so much for coming by and chatting to us.
Thanks for having me.
And before we go today, I wanted to shout out some of the comments you guys have been leaving on our YouTube episode all about why Elon Musk and JD Vance want a US baby boom. So Jay said, you can't solve the baby problem if you can't solve the dating problem, and you can't solve the dating problem if people decided they don't want to form community with the people around them. It's always so good to hear from you guys, so remember you can comment below, like and subscribe at any time. We're on the BBC World Service YouTube channel every Tuesday and Thursday, but for now, I'm Ikra. This is What's in the World from the BBC World Service. I'll see you guys soon. Bye.